What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be doing a 2-round Dynasty rookie mock draft. This is going to be Superflex, tight end premium, full PPR type of format. So if you play in those Superflex leagues, you're looking for some Dynasty advice, we are going to be doing that here today. Now, we're also going to be using some landing spots here for today's mock draft. We are pulling landing spots from Kyle Crabb's mock draft over at the 33rd team. They do some great work. I'm going to link this mock draft in the description, but without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking some rookies. All right, so as I mentioned, we are going to be talking about some rookies in some landing spots using that 3-round NFL mock draft by Kyle Crabbs at the 33rd team. Now, this was published on March 17th, 2025, so you guys are seeing this very, very soon after it was published, and that is what inspired these landing spots. Now, you guys are seeing all of those up on the screen right now. There were 29 fantasy-relevant players that were drafted in this mock draft, so that is the player pool that we're going to be drafting from today. Disclaimer, if you guys have a player that you really like and you wanted to hear me talk about and they were not drafted in this mock draft, we are not going to be talking about them today. So guys who like Cam Scatterboo, save me with that. You're sleeping on Cam Scatterboo, because we're not going to talk about him today, and it's only because he was not drafted in this mock draft, not because I don't view him as a second-round pick or even a guy like that. But at the end of the day, if he wasn't drafted in this mock, we're not talking about him today. So with that little disclaimer out of the way, hopefully we avoid some of those comments. But at the end of the day, we are going to be kicking it off here at the 101, and the player who's coming off the board for the 101 is going to be Ashton Jeanty for the Chicago Bears. Now, Ashton Jeanty, he was drafted round 1, pick 10, so we got that top 10 draft capital that we saw. Now, at the end of the day, this is a player I don't need to talk too much about. He has the big playability, great vision, great balance, the elusiveness, all of those things considered. This is a player that's going to be very, very fantasy relevant from day one. And you put him here in Chicago where they have a revamped offensive line. The offense play calling is going to be better coming from that Detroit Lions offense with Ben Johnson, now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. I don't see a reason why a guy like Ashton Jeanty can't come in and be an immediate impact player, a top 5 fantasy running back from the day that he enters. At least market value wise, he's going to be a top 5 running back. And I think even with DeAndre Swift on the depth chart, this is going to make DeAndre Swift a complementary piece to Ashton Jeanty, who is going to be the clear prominent RB1 in this offense. I don't really want to overthink this one too much. He's still a tier 1 clear-cut type of player in my rankings in this year's rookie class, so he is coming off the board for me at the 101. Now, going over to my 102, I think this guy is also a clear-cut 102 just based off of the landing spots here in today's mock draft. It is going to be Omarion Hampton here of the Pittsburgh Steelers, actually, after being drafted round 1, pick 21. So we got first-round draft capital from Omarion Hampton, which is exactly what we want to see. There's a chance that Ashton Jeanty is the only first-round running back, but if we do see another guy get first-round draft capital like Hampton here to the Steelers, I think this is going to skyrocket him into that number 2 slot in your rookie drafts, and it's a no-brainer pick for me. Obviously, he's a physical runner. This is a guy who has workhorse potential. He has some pass game upside, even though he needs to improve a little bit in that pass protection. I think he can do some stuff in the receiving game that's going to make him a contributor in those PPR leagues as well. Obviously, they've moved on from Najee Harris there in Pittsburgh. Jalen Warren's still there on that second-round tender, but to me, this is a complementary piece to Omarion Hampton, who will be Arthur Smith's bell cow, a guy who's used guys like Tyler Algier, Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson as bell cows at times when he's been the offensive play caller. I think they'll do that here in Pittsburgh, and this is one of the few teams who I think actually could use a first-round pick on a running back, and if they do use it on a guy like Hampton who checks all of the analytical boxes, I think this is a smash pick here at the number 2 spot. Now, moving on to the 103, I want to talk about Tetairoa McMillan because he is my 3rd overall pick. He is also my wide receiver 1 in the class currently. He goes to the Denver Broncos round 1, pick 20, so we get that top 20 draft capital out of Tet McMillan. Now, this is a player who has kind of fallen down draft boards over the last couple of weeks. I think a lot of that is because it was out of sight, out of mind for Tet McMillan. He obviously didn't work out at the NFL Combine, but we just saw the pro day, and the numbers came in just fine for Tet McMillan. This is a player who has elite ball skills. He has some good route running ability. I think he has mismatch potential at the NFL level just based off of the size and the deep ball ability that he has against some of these tough matchups that he saw in college. And I think that this is a player who in Denver would see an immediate role alongside Courtland Sutton and be the long-term number 1 wide receiver for Bo Nix in this offense post Courtland Sutton's era here in Denver. And not to mention, you also have a good offensive play caller like Sean Payton, who we've seen have elite wide receiver 1 seasons out of guys like Michael Thomas before for the New Orleans Saints. I'm not saying that that's what Tet McMillan can do, because Michael Thomas was obviously the number 1 overall wide receiver for fantasy football purposes at times there in New Orleans, but we've at least seen Sean Payton feature his guys before, and I think he could do that with Tet McMillan over the course of Bo Nix and Ted McMillan's career here in Denver with Sean Payton. Now let's move on to my 104. I did say this was super flex, so we do probably see the quarterbacks come off the board at some point. We are going to see the first one come off the board right now. It is going to be Cam Ward of the Tennessee Titans. He went round 1, pick 1, so the first overall pick in this draft. And like I said, goes to Tennessee. I don't love the landing spot for Tennessee. The weapons there are pretty mediocre. Calvin Ridley right now being one of the best weapons that they have with Tony Pollard. Obviously, that's not a lot to get you super excited about anybody here. However, of the quarterbacks in this year's class, I do think Cam Ward has the highest ceiling for fantasy football purposes. This is a player who has big arm. He has an aggressive play style where he's always looking to throw the ball vertical downfield. He has a dual threat ability as well to make some plays outside of the pocket, and I think this is a clear opportunity for a rookie to come in and step in and be the QB1 immediately. Sorry, Will Levis fans, it's just not going to happen at this point. And I think given the instability at quarterback here for Tennessee, this is a player who comes in week 1 as the starter. Now, obviously, the Titans, they do need a new guy to come in and kind of be the leader of this franchise, and this is a team that's going to be definitely in a rebuild mode for a little while probably. But if you're looking in Superflex leagues for some quarterback help, I think a guy like Cam Ward in this opportunity here for the Tennessee Titans, at least as their franchise guy, or at least that's the plan for him to be the franchise guy moving forward. You probably can't let him fall too much further than this, so we do take him here off the board at the 104. Now, sticking with the quarterbacks at the 105, I am going to take Shedeur Sanders, who did get drafted by the New York Giants. He went round 1, pick 3, so we got that top 5 draft capital that we wanted out of Shedeur Sanders. He gets to go play with Malik Neighbors. Now, obviously, Sanders, he's a poised and accurate quarterback. He's calm under pressure. He's excellent with anticipation. I think he has really good accuracy. And I think when you're looking at quarterbacks in this year's class, he's probably one of the guys that has the highest floor. As far as the ceiling goes, I'm not really sure how high his ceiling is, but the floor is definitely fine. He is an excellent decision maker, and I definitely think he can be a reliable game manager at the next level. And that's not to use that in a negative, derogatory type of term. We've seen guys like Jared Goff be a game manager who has been fantasy football relevant before. Now, obviously, being drafted by the New York Giants in the top 5, that does mean that there is a very, very likelihood chance that he is the week 1 starter. I think that would be the given if he was drafted by them. Obviously, we still need to see guys like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Jameis Winston and all of these other guys get signed to some respectable rosters. But at the end of the day, I think the Giants, they need to focus on finding their future quarterback, and putting Sanders in this position to be the long-term leader there with Malik Neighbors obviously gives him a lot of fantasy football potential. I think this is a very good type of case scenario for Malik Neighbors. Having an accurate quarterback like Sanders, I think this is going to be fine for them. Brian Daboll is a fine play caller as well. I don't think he's as elite as we thought he was at one point when he was working with Josh Allen there in Buffalo, but at the end of the day, also, I do think that this is a team that needs the quarterback and at least has a weapon here that Shedeur Sanders could throw the football to. So he does come off the board for me in the top 5 here in this super flex mock. Now, at the 106, we're going to take it right back to the running back position. I'm going TreVeyon Henderson of the Las Vegas Raiders. He was drafted in round 2, pick 37, so very close to the top of that, almost snuck into the first round. And this is a player who I really do like. I think he has 3 down potential at the next level. He can contribute as a runner, as a pass catcher, as a blocker, really everything that an NFL team needs, he's going to be capable of doing. Now, this is also a player who plays with a ton of speed. I think he has a lot of acceleration, a lot of burst, and he has the ability to break off some big gains. And like I said, being a good pass protector, I think he's going to be on the field a lot, reliable as a third down back. Now, the opportunity here in Las Vegas is going to be good for him. Obviously, they've struggled with their run game ever since the departure of Josh Jacobs, and I think Henderson could step in and make an immediate fantasy football impact. There's obviously a lot of weak competition that's there right now. Guys like Alexander Madison leaving the building, guys like Raheem Mostert entering the building. These are just stopgap depth type of options for me at the running back position, and I think TreVeyon Henderson would come in and be an immediate fantasy football producer, and I think he has the ability to, in this certain type of situation with Pete Carroll and this offense with Geno Smith, maybe give you top 15 type of fantasy football numbers as a rookie. So he comes off the board here for me as the 106. Now let's move on to my 107. At the 107, I'm actually going to go to wide receiver slash cornerback Travis Hunter, and yes, he gets drafted by the New England Patriots. And to me, this draft capital coming off with the 4th overall pick, seeing how they have missed out on wide receivers in free agency and in the trade market, it screams to me that Travis Hunter will be needed at the wide receiver position here in New England. Obviously, this is a player who has a ton of athleticism. He's a freak athlete, elite at tracking the ball, catching tough passes, doing all those stuff. We've seen the highlight reels of Travis Hunter, and yes, he is going to be playing on the defensive side of the ball. I think New England will use him there, but like I said, the need for this team, it does scream wide receiver, so I think he does lean into that aspect of his game a little bit more here in New England. So this could be the best case scenario for Travis Hunter, and if Travis Hunter were Drake May's wide receiver 1 to start the season, I think we could see him lean into those talents, and I think he could be a very, very fantasy relevant type of wide receiver, and I would have him come off the board as my wide receiver 2 if I knew that he was going to get that many wide receiver snaps like I project him to get here in New England. Now, coming in at the 108, I am going to go with Emeka Egbuka, and he goes to the Houston Texans, reuniting him with CJ Stroud from their Ohio State days. Now, he did get picked in the first round as well. This is a player who I think is a very, very good route runner. He's very fluid. He has some very good ball skills. He's going to play that slot wide receiver role very well at the next level, and I think he's going to be a very good complementary wide receiver 2 to a guy like Nico Collins. Now, his after the catch competitiveness, he's tough, he fights for extra yards, he does all of these things that we want to see that do translate to extra fantasy football points. And like I said, I think this is a player that's going to be a starter day one coming in, who can play day one and has a lot of fantasy football potential. Now, obviously the depth chart here outside of Nico Collins is fairly weak. We've seen guys like Stephon Diggs leave, going in free agency, likely not going to be re-signing with the Houston Texans. Also then bringing over competition like Christian Kirk, who's probably not going to be that big of a difference maker for the Houston Texans. He's probably more so the wide receiver 3 for this offense than he is the wide receiver 2. And guys like Tank Dell, who've dealt with injuries and unfortunately are probably not going to be playing football in 2025. It just screams value in day one for the wide receiver position, and having a very savvy type of wide receiver like Emeka Egbuka, I think this is a great fit for him. In fact, it's probably one of the best fits for him in the NFL draft, so I do take him here at the 108 as my wide receiver 3. Now let's kick it back to the running back position. I want to talk about Kaleb Johnson, because Kaleb Johnson comes in at the 109. He goes to the Denver Broncos after being drafted in the second round, pick 51 by Sean Payton. Obviously, we've talked about how the Broncos, they've gone off of Javonte Williams. They've been looking for that running back to kind of be the bell cow in this offense, and I think Kaleb Johnson would have a pretty decent opportunity to do that given the draft capital that he got in this draft. Now, this is a guy who's a pretty decisive runner. He runs with a lot of power, a lot of toughness, and I think he's going to be a very good fit in this offense. Now, overall, I do have some questions about him as a 3-down type of back. I think he struggles a little bit in pass protection at times, and I don't know if he's the greatest of pass catchers overall. So maybe this is where the benefit of having a guy like Jaleel McLaughlin on the roster to come in and just take a couple of those reps from him does prove to be a little bit of a benefit to the Denver Broncos. But overall, this is a player that's going to get the early down work, the goal line work. He's going to get some of the pass catching work. He's going to be a grinder here for Sean Payton and the Broncos, and I think he's going to be a great fit in Denver, and definitely somebody that's worthy of first-round draft capital given the limited competition here in Denver. Going to 110, I'm going to take Quinshon Judkins of Ohio State. Now, he gets drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers in this draft in the 3rd round, pick 86, so he still gets that day 2 draft capital, but it is the 3rd round. Now, he goes to Los Angeles, where obviously they just spent some money on Najee Harris to come in and give him a 1-year deal with almost $10 million in value. Now, a lot of that is incentive-based. I think they're still looking for a guy to maybe be the long-term running back. Can Najee Harris be that if he has a good season? Certainly, but this draft pick gives me worries for Najee Harris. Judkins is a tough, aggressive runner. I think he has 3-down potential at the next level. This is a guy who can develop into that lead back, and I think he contributes very well in both the rushing and the receiving game, and I think you give him this opportunity to kind of be the change of pace guy behind Najee Harris week 1. I think that's going to give you a lot of opportunities where you can go out there and impress this Greg Roman offense, impress Jim Harbaugh, and I think it'll be very shortly lived that Najee Harris is the bell cow of this offense, because I think Quinshon Judkins just gives you that much more juice in this offense. I think he's going to be an incredible fit in this offense, and this is a player I'd be very excited about. He just has to get through that first year hurdle of battling Najee Harris, but after that contract is off the books and out of the way, Quinshon Judkins is going to be an absolute fantasy football monster in Jim Harbaugh's Los Angeles offense. Now, going on to the 111, I did say it's tight end premium as well. How about Tyler Warren, who got drafted 1st round, pick 7 by the New York Jets? This is a player that can play everywhere. He plays multiple spots. He even played halfback at times there at Penn State. Now, he's also very good at the contested catch. I think he absorbs contact well. He has an elite football type of body. This is a high potential type of tight end that I think has the ability to become a very, very elite fantasy football option in the tight end room. And obviously it's very hard to draft these tight ends highly. If you get guys like Brock Bowers, who smashed last year, you're obviously very happy, but then you spend 1st round picks on guys like Dalton Kincaid, and you obviously look at that pick a couple years later and you say, hey, maybe I should have just waited on the tight end. This tight end class is pretty good, but overall I think Tyler Warren is the real deal. I would be taking him here in the back end of 1st rounds, and you have this New York Jets offense where they do need some additional pass catchers in this offense. Justin Fields going to be there. We want Tyler Warren to be the security blanket for Justin Fields, and I think there's a lot of targets on the table with Tyler Conklin leaving in free agency. I think Tyler Warren would be a great pick in tight end premium formats, and he does come off the board here for me at the 111. Now coming in at my 112, the final pick in the first round, we do have Matthew Golden of the Seattle Seahawks. He was drafted round 1, pick 18, so he gets that top draft capital that we saw after having a very good NFL combine. This is a versatile receiver. I think he's very effective at all receiver spots. He's a big play threat. He has some physicality, the catch strength that you want to see out of some of those number 1 wide receivers at the NFL level. And speaking of wide receiver ones, I think he has the potential to develop into a wide receiver 1 at the next level. Now, obviously where he's going here in Seattle, that's probably why he falls all the way down to the back end of the first round. And I think there's even an argument that he goes early second, considering some of the other guys that we're going to talk about. But when you look at the talent, when you look at the opportunity here, I think you have to trust the talent and think that guys like Cooper Kupp eventually are just not going to be able to get it done, and they're going to turn to their young guys in Matthew Golden and Jaxson Smith-Njigba. This type of landing spot and this type of player is something where I could see it very similar to a guy like JSN, who it took a year for him to get some value, a guy like Rome Odunze, where we think it's going to take a year for him to get some value. This could be the next type of first round wide receiver that takes some time to develop into a true number 1 or a true fantasy football producer. And I think Matthew Golden, he has the talent to do it. Just the opportunity, the landing spot. It's not my favorite of landing spots, but the draft capital is certainly good for Matthew Golden here. So now before we go on to round 2, I'm just going to throw that first round back up on the screen. That way you can kind of see how these guys have been drafted. Just to recap the first round, Ashton, Jeanty, Omarion, Hampton, Ted McMillan, Cam Ward, Shedeur, Sanders, and TreVeyon Henderson. That rounds the first half of the first round, followed by Travis Hunter, Emeka Egbuka, Kaleb Johnson, Quinshon, Judkins, Tyler Warren, and Matthew Golden as the second half of that first round. So let's move on to our 201. We got 12 more players that we got to talk about here in today's video, and at the 201, I'm going with Luther Burden III, who got drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Round 2, pick 36 was the draft capital, so he almost snuck into that first round as well, similar to TreVeyon Henderson. And this is another wide receiver that I think has some elite athleticism. I think he has some great playmaking ability. He's very good after the catch at all 3 levels of the football field. He's a big play just waiting to happen. I think he has some room to grow as a wide receiver, but I think he has a very high ceiling, one of the higher ceilings of all the wide receivers here in this year's draft class. Now, obviously, there's a lack of talent in this wide receiver room behind Bryant Thomas Jr. We've seen Christian Kirk go. Gabe Davis has been an underperformer. Even Evan Engram has left this offense and now went to Denver. I think there's a chance that Luther Burden could be very fantasy relevant day 1 as the number 2 wide receiver alongside Bryant Thomas Jr. And obviously having a guy like bdge in your offense is going to cap his overall upside, but I think we've seen players like Jordan Addison, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, you know, all of those guys who've been elite wide receiver 2s to a prolific wide receiver 1 on their NFL teams. I think Luther Burden could be that for Bryant Thomas Jr. in this Liam Cohen-led offense. Let's go to the 202. The 202, I'm going with a quarterback. It's going to be Jaxson Dart, who got drafted round 2, pick 33 by the Cleveland Browns. Now, he gets to go in here almost immediately after starting 3 years in the SEC at Ole Miss and work with head coach Kevin Stefanski, who is known for being a little bit of an offensive-minded head coach. Now, getting him here in Cleveland, I think there definitely is some things that lack excitement. Overall, I think Jerry Jeudy is a fine wide receiver, but having him be your go-to guy does leave a little bit to be desired. David Njoku, a talented tight end. Guys like Cedric Tillman on the roster as well, but I think that this offense needs a lot of help to kind of revamp themselves. Now, a guy like Jaxson Dart being drafted in the second round, that definitely doesn't put him as a day 1 starter here for the Cleveland Browns. I think this could be a team that maybe works a deal back out with Jameis Winston, and Jameis Winston comes in to be the bridge guy where Jaxson Dart learns behind him. But I do think that Dart has some of the talent that could translate to some NFL success. I think he's an efficient quarterback. I think he's a smart decision maker, and overall he has that tough type of mobility that he can lean on if he needs to. He's not necessarily a dual threat quarterback, but he can run if needed. So overall, in a Superflex mock draft, I do think you have to take a guy like Jaxson Dart. Even though we really only want to target quarterbacks with that first round draft capital for the most part, this is close enough, and I think Jaxson Dart has the opportunity ahead of him that he's definitely worth the conversation here at the 202. Let's move on to the 203. I'm going back to the tight end. Well, we're going to talk Coleston Loveland, who was drafted round 1, pick 14 by the Indianapolis Colts, and it feels like Coleston Loveland is a value right here where I have him in this draft, but it's hard to pass up on some of that wide receiver and that running back talent, considering that Coleston Loveland still got first round draft capital. Now, this is a guy who I think has elite pass catching potential at the NFL level. He has the athleticism, he has the ball skills to be one of the top pass catchers in the tight end room, and he's a pretty solid separator too, especially when he's against zone coverage. Now, I think this is a player who's very versatile in his route running. I think he has a high ceiling with some strong hands as well, and given the Colts tight end room, who has virtually nobody in the tight end room at the moment, I think Coleston Loveland would be a day 1 starter. Now, is that going to be be for Daniel Jones or for Anthony Richardson. I don't know. That quarterback competition still has to be put out, but there is no question that Coleston Loveland would come in and be an immediate player in this offense for a security blanket type of option for a guy like Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. There are some other pass catchers in this offense that probably make the target volume for a guy like Loveland something to be a little bit worried about. Pittman, Downs, Adonai, Alec Pierce, there are some talented receivers here, but Coleston Loveland overall in a tight end premium definitely needs to be drafted here at the 203. Let's move on to the 204. The 204, I'm going to take Tre Harris, who was drafted in round 3, pick 68 by the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, the Las Vegas Raiders, they are lacking some pass catching options. Harris, I think he has a lot of size and speed that you want to see out of some of these NFL prototypical type of wide receivers. We've seen Ole Miss put out some of these types of bodied wide receivers before in years past. Now, I think he's an improved route runner. He improved over the last year or so, and I do think he has the ability to make some contested catches at the next level, which means he can contribute at the NFL level for these NFL rosters. Now, he does have the ability to be a reliable wide receiver too. I think he has a big play option, even with some of the past injury concerns that he's had. But with Devontae Adams long gone and Jacoby Myers as the clear wide receiver 1, I think right here alongside them and Brock Bowers, there's a chance for a rookie wide receiver to come in and see a significant role day 1 for Geno Smith as the big play option. And I do think Tre Harris fits that mold very well in this offense, so I'd love to see how Pete Carroll uses him, but he could be very fantasy relevant right out the gate. We'll see what happens overall if the talent is there, but I do think that the opportunities will at least be there day 1. Now, coming in at the 205, I want to talk about Dylan Sampson, who goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars, round 3, pick 88. And this is a little bit of a weird pick for the most part, but I do love the player overall. I think Sampson shows strong instincts and vision when he plays. I think he's really good after contact. He has a very good ability to get some extra yards when he's running through some of these tight holes. I do think he's also a player that has a lot of potential and a lot of room to grow at the NFL level with the right coaching and the right type of protection in front of him. And this is a guy who may not be the day 1 starter for a team, but he could ultimately become their guy over the next year or so if they give him the right type of development. Now, this situation, like I said, is a little bit odd because you have Liam Cohen coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and right now you have Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby on the roster, which does kind of feel like that should be the 1-2 punch. Now, I do think that Travis Etienne, who is on the last year of his rookie contract, may be somebody that they're looking to explore trade options or maybe try and get him out of the door before the end of the year is even finished, especially if you bring a guy like Dylan Sampson into the building. And if that were to happen early, like at the trade deadline, I think Sampson could be a league winner down the stretch, potentially with Tank Bigsby there to complement him. But the more likely case scenario is that Travis Etienne finishes the year as the running back, he enters free agency and he leaves, and then you have Dylan Sampson and Tank Bigsby here as the 1A, 1B in this offense, kind of like how Rachaad White and Bucky Irving were for Tampa Bay last year with Liam Cohen. I think that Dylan Sampson would be more so the Bucky Irving and Tank Bigsby would be more so the Rachaad White. Let's go into the 206. This is another player that rose a lot through the combine process. It's going to be Bashal Tutin over there for the Buffalo Bills, who decided to draft him round 2, pick 62. And to me, that's a little bit of a head scratcher. I'm not going to lie. As much as Bashal has started to get some hype, this is a player who's very explosive. He's a dynamic athlete. He obviously ran the fast 40. He has good power and contact balance. I just don't see a clear path for him to come in and be a huge difference maker for fantasy football, considering that James Cook is sitting there and looking to get paid as the future running back 1 for the Buffalo Bills. Now, obviously, the Bills, they do need to add a little bit of depth behind him. We've seen guys like Ray Davis be fine before, and we've seen guys like Ty Johnson also be a little bit relevant at times just from an NFL standpoint. But at the end of the day, they do need some depth. It just kind of hurts me in fantasy football for this circumstance because I do think that the draft capital is something we want to chase, but this opportunity and the likelihood of Tutin just being a change of pace back behind James Cook does worry me a little bit. Still somebody that I'd be taking in the second round. Obviously, we take him at the 206, but the talent of James Cook is certainly concerning. I think the only way that Bashal ends up being a huge fantasy football hit is if James Cook leaves and he does not get the contract that he wants, but I don't necessarily think that Buffalo is going to let him out the door. Let's go to the 207. The 207, I'm going back to the wide receiver position. We're going Jaden Higgins, who goes round 2, pick 47 to the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is another player that has a massive catch radius. He's a major red zone threat as well. Great ball skills, making him super dangerous on jump balls and contested catches. He also has a lot of versatility to his game. He plays with a lot of physicality, and kind of like guys like Ted McMillan who have the size and the body control, I think Jaden Higgins has similar aspects to his game that make him a little bit of a mismatch on the outside. Now, obviously, going here to Arizona, that does put him in a room next to Marvin Harrison Jr., who we do hope and we do believe that he will take a step forward next year, trying to be the #1 wide receiver long-term for the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray. But the depth chart behind Marvin Harrison Jr. is horrible, so I do think that Jaden Higgins could come in and be a supporting type of wide receiver to Marvin Harrison Jr. as the other opposite outside wide receiver. receiver and kind of could be a big play option, a red zone type of option for Kyler Murray alongside Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. Let's move on to the 208. The 208 is where I'm going to take Alec Ayomanor, who was selected round 2, pick 40 by the New Orleans Saints. Now, this is also another player that has the pro size. He has the physicality, the strength that you want to see as a strong possession type of wide receiver, especially in contested situations and when he's playing in the slot. He has good speed for vertical routes. I think he utilizes that build-up speed to stem coverage on corner routes and slants, showing he has some versatility in his route running as well. But overall, I think this is a player who has some developmental upside and maybe isn't a day one contributor. Now, obviously, this is an offense that's going to be led by Derek Carr in 2025, a new head coach in Kellen Moore in the building, and overall, you got wide receivers like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, who both are established wide receivers in this offense. But the wide receiver depth chart behind Olave and Shaheed is thin, and it does create an opening for a rookie to earn a prominent role in this offense and potentially secure a long-term role. If the overall depth for the New Orleans Saints remains unaddressed, I do think that could mean some additional opportunities in the future for a rookie to be productive in this offense. Let's move on to the 209. I'm going to go with Jalen Royals, who went to the New England Patriots in round 3, pick 69. So the New England Patriots, they end up getting 2 wide receivers in this draft. Travis Hunter, who they're going to play probably both at DB and wide receiver in the first round, and then Jalen Royals in the second round. Now, this is good because obviously Drake May has been a little bit of a loser in the free agent cycle so far. They haven't really gotten the help that they need in that wide receiver room, but getting 2 rookies in the building should help him a lot. I do think Jalen Royals, he has good body control. He's very good at the contested catch. He's a versatile route runner as well, who can be a very physical possession type of wide receiver at the next level. And I think he would do a very decent job complementing a guy like Travis Hunter on this offense. And when you're looking at opportunities, I think this is probably the depth chart that has the most opportunity because, quite frankly, nobody is established at wide receiver on this offense. So if you need a guy who can come in and at least try and make some noise in training camp, rookie mini camp, and in the early days of his NFL career, Jalen Royals certainly will have the opportunity to do that here in New England, and I think this is a decent landing spot for him and his skill set. Let's go to the 210. We have a few picks left in this draft. We're going to talk about Isaiah Bond, who was drafted round 3, pick 74 by the Carolina Panthers. This is a pretty good fit for Isaiah Bond, who is a very, very good athlete. I think this is a strong route runner who has a lot of potential as a big play option in an offense and a field stretcher in an offense. And I think having him in this offense with guys like Adam Thielen and Xavier Legette, I think he's going to have opportunities day one to come in and at least get some valuable touches. Obviously, the Carolina Panthers are looking for reasons to give Bryce Young the title of franchise quarterback, and I think he showed some steps of improvement last year, but certainly getting him some additional weapons like Isaiah Bond, who can make that big play after the catch, is going to be key in doing that. So I think this is a decent fit for Isaiah Bond and somebody who I think is worth drafting in the top 24 picks. Moving on to the 211, we're going to talk about another tight end. This is the last tight end in this draft, but it's Elijah Arroyo, who did get drafted round 2, pick 55 by the Los Angeles Chargers. Arroyo is a very well-rounded blocker. I think he's effective both at the point of attack and as a move blocker, even though his technique needs a little bit of refinement. Now, this is a player who has improved as an athlete in 2024. I think we saw a little bit of that at the combine as well. He has some very reliable hands in traffic, and I think that the Chargers do have a current need for an upgrade at the tight end position on their current roster. Putting Arroyo here would give another option to Justin Herbert in this offense with Ladd McConkey, and I think that this could be an opportunity for him to at least get some relevancy in fantasy football as a tight end. And putting him in this depth chart, there's really not a lot of competition for him to overtake, so I think the athleticism and the skill set of Arroyo could prove early on to be a difference maker for the Los Angeles Chargers. And now the last pick in this draft, we're going to go to the 212. We're talking about Jalen Noel, who ended up getting picked round 2, pick 40 by the Atlanta Falcons. A very talented player, not a great landing spot in my opinion. He's a very versatile playmaker. He has a lot of speed and separation to his game. He can get in and out of routes very quickly, and I think that makes him very good as a wide receiver option. He also has some value to NFL rosters that I think is going to be something that pushes his draft stock up the board just a little bit, because he can be a very skillful punt returner and kick returner at the NFL level, especially considering their new rule change. Now, the reason why I don't ultimately love this is because when you look at this roster, having guys like Bijan Robinson, having guys like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, there's a lot of mouths to feed already in this offense, and I think having Jalen Noel here, there's definitely room for him to grow into some additional opportunities, but they're not going to be there day one. Behind the receiving options, though, of London, Mooney, and Pitts, I do think that there's very limited competition, so there's a chance that he finds himself on the field early in 3 wide receiver sets, but we'll see how often that translates to fantasy football points. Overall, he sneaks in as a top 24 option for me, but I do just think that there's a little bit of hurdles that he has to get over just to make this fantasy football landing spot relevant, and so because of that, he fell a little bit further here in the second round. So let's recap that second round for you guys, just to give you guys the 12 guys that were drafted here. Kicking it off in the top half, we had Luther Burden, Jackson Dart, Coleston Loveland, Trey Harris, Dylan Sampson, and Bayshal Tootin. Then in the second half here, we had Jaden Higgins, Ayomanor, Jalen Roy, Royals, Isaiah Bond, Elijah Arroyo, and Jalen Noel. And that concludes our 2 rounds of this rookie mock with landing spots given to us from that 33rd team draft. So if you guys did enjoy today's video, thank you so much for watching all of it. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hit the like button if you did, if you found something entertaining, informative, actionable. That does help this channel a lot, so make sure you go hit that for me. Also, make sure you go hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the time of the NFL draft, so hopefully you guys can help us get that. We got about 500 more that we need to do, so if you're new to the channel, make sure you click that button for me. And last but not least, make sure you go join our Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with your Dynasty Fantasy Football teams 24/7, 365. But with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you guys on our next episode. But until then, peace out.